My name is Sloan. I am 22, African American with light brown skin that never quite decides between honey and bronze under the stage lights. I have a long face and a stubborn jaw, soft coils I keep braided back when I am calling cues, and a voice people describe as low and calm even when my insides are a startled flock. I am stage manager for the university's fall production because I am good at keeping lists and listening to walls. Because I like the way a theater hums before anyone else hears it, the way dust hangs in the light like a quiet chorus. I wear black jeans that never fully lose the chalk prints from spike marks, a faded tour hoodie from a show I loved too hard, scuffed black sneakers with gaff tape scarring one toe, a lanyard, with keys that jingle like a tambourine when I walk too fast, eat cold pizza slices over the light board when we run late, and chew mint gum to hide the stubborn ghost of coffee that lives in my mouth during tech week. I live alone in a studio over a florist shop 2 blocks from the theater building, the kind of place where the smell of damp earth and cut stems drifts up through the floorboards at dawn. And the radiator ticks like an old metronome, and I keep my script binder on the kitchen counter because that's where my hands know to reach. First every morning. On load-in day we found the cord. We were all up in the rafters in a chain, sweaty and laughing too loudly because heights sharpen your jokes. The black box is older than our grandparents' exposed brick that drinks sound, catwalks like narrow rib bones, a grid above that looks like a metal web. We had the ghost light rolled downstage center, its single bulb glowing like a stubborn candle because Eliza, our director, insists we keep it on whenever the house is dark. Eliza is 40 and Italian American, lean as a fencing foil with hair like a glossy cap and eyes that cut to the moment's core. She wears a black turtleneck and trousers that whisper when she moves, and she drinks bitter espresso from a thermos and tells us stories about a foundering production in Prague, like they were bedtime tales. That morning, Gabe and Ren were on the catwalk. Gabe is Puerto Rican and campus famous for a singing voice that sounds older than anyone has a right to at 21. He laughs with his whole body, his curls always escaping his beanie. Ren is Korean American and built like a dancer, neat and precise. He wears soft gray tees that make him look like someone drew him in pencil. He never sweats. He glows. They were feeding cable when Gabe said, Sloan, what is this? His voice pitched up in a way I had only heard once when a bat got into the fly tower last spring. I craned up and saw it, a loop of red silk tied clean around one of the old wooden rafters that cross above the stage, the color wrong in a room of blacks and browns and metal. The silk catching that ghost light and throwing it back like a small private sunrise. The knot was strange. Not a bowline, not a clove hitch. It was tidy and old, and it looked like it had been there longer than any of us had been alive. The silk was thin, but the twist of it suggested weight. It reminded me of a ribbon you would see around a wrist in a painting. It reminded me of arteries. Eliza squinted and said, probably from some long-gone prop master with a flair for color. And Ren went up another rung, fingers careful, and untied it the way you untie something that looks like it might complain. The silk felt cool when I held the coil. It slid across my palm like water, but heavier. A faint scent rode up from it. Not dust, not mildew, something like pomegranate rind and old perfume. Eliza said, we don't want a trip hazard in the grid, toss it. I hesitated. I don't know why. It felt like something you should return to the exact shape you found it in. But Gabe had already called. He shoots, he scores, and lobbed the coil down. It thumped softly on the marley and lay there like a sleeping snake. I threw it in the props bin where abandoned things go to forget themselves, and we went back to work because cues don't care for superstitions. They only care for timing. The first days of rehearsal smelled like sawdust and acetone. The staple gun snapped a relentless beat while Dahlia, our set designer, a tall Ethiopian woman with hair and a crown of braids and paint freckles on her cheekbones like constellations, sketched chalk lines and measured twice. The stage made its usual music, metal ratchet, laughter, the hiss of a fresh roll of gaff pulled like ribbon candy. The script was a modern retelling of a Greek tragedy, which we all joked about because theater students think we can flirt with curses if we make the reference obvious. The joke felt good in my mouth until it changed taste, days later, when the laughter had nowhere to go. I noticed the first small wrong thing the second night, before anyone died, though that is not the right order to tell a story. Order doesn't matter to a theater. Everything is happening all the time. I was locking up at midnight. My binder hugged to my chest, the ghost light glowing like a patient. The black box yawned around me as I crossed to the door. And there, where I had left my lanyard coiled neatly, a thin thread of red silk had been fed through my key ring, knotted once in that same neat ancient way. I stood very still, the only sound the faint high ring a soda can makes when it settles after you set it down. I plucked the thread free and felt a chill rise up my arms like my blood had learned a new direction. I told myself Gabe was making a joke. I told myself. Ren, precise Ren, would never. I slipped the thread into my pocket. I slept with the ghost light still there in my mind, like an after-image your eyes keep even when they are closed. 2 days later we lost Mina. She was 20, black, 5'2" with a smile that arrived like a confession. She played our chorus leader and ate grapes one by one from a plastic container during breaks. She wore soft socks with tiny suns on them and always had 3 pens in the pocket of her cardigan because one would run away and one would run dry. And she believed in the mercy of the third. She didn't come to rehearsal on Tuesday. Eliza texted and then called me. Her voice as careful as a teacup in a moving car. The campus email came at dusk. The language flat and terrible. Mina had been found in her dorm room. There was mention of counseling resources and no further details. But details still come. They just arrive in teeth-grinding fragments. Dahlia called me and did not say anything for a long time. The silence full of breath like someone holding a bowl steady with both hands. When she spoke, her voice was small. Her roommate said there was a red silk cord. The words fell like screws hitting concrete. I sat down on the floor of my studio between a stack of scripts and a box of spike tape, and I pressed my thumb so hard into the edge of my binder I left a crescent and did not feel it. We gathered in the black box because we had nowhere else to put our bodies. The ghost light still burned because I had rolled it to center and plugged it back in after house management had unplugged it for a facilities inspection. I didn't explain myself because I didn't have the reason yet. We sat in a messy semicircle on stage. Ren polished his glasses with the corner of his shirt and then set them on his nose and then took them off again. Gabe kept his beanie in his hands and turned it as if it were a steering wheel. Eliza stood and then sat and then stood again. She said, "We will not rehearse today," and then didn't move like the words had become a room she could sit in. I said, "I found a piece of red silk on my keys and felt like I had put my heart on the slick Marley for everyone to step over." Dahlia closed her eyes for a full minute that felt like a held breath for the building. Gabe whispered, "We threw that thing out," and the ghost light hummed in the center like a throat-clearing. In the days after, more wrong threads appeared, a red filament threaded through a sneaker lace, a sliver tied around a water bottle cap, a flourish of silk around a door handle that I swear I had checked twice. I woke with a line around my wrist once, not tight, not cutting, just resting there like a promise or a post-dash at And I cut it with a pair of fabric scissors and changed the locks on my apartment, because sometimes that is how you grieve. You do things to doors. I stopped sleeping with the window open because every draft felt like it was carrying words. The theater changed smell, less sawdust, more iron, a tang like biting your lip and pretending you meant to. My lists grew longer and messier. My cues lost their commas. I kept the ghost light on like a superstition I had backed into. We lost Kazim a week later. He was 23, Turkish with a boxer's shoulders and a poet's eyes. He brought flaky cheese pastries to share and ate them with thumb and forefinger like he was afraid to crush them. He made a joke about always dying in Act 3 because he had the face for tragedy. He did not come to notes on Thursday. The police tape on the door of his off-campus apartment was a softer red than the silk. The email used the same template. Students gathered on the lawn like sheep in terrible weather. Gabe's hands shook so hard he couldn't open his thermos, and I held it for him and unscrewed the lid, and the smell of coffee was both mercy and knife. Eliza rubbed her temples like she was trying to press back a tide. She said, "We pause, we recalibrate." And I said nothing because the word pause felt like a false kindness. as if grief were a DVR and not a flood. Asterisk. The third time the cord found someone before they could vanish. Asterisk. It was Ren. His quiet had deepened. Until it was the kind you don't dare pry at. The kind that is a skin. Asterisk. I went to his apartment because he missed a spacing rehearsal. His place is immaculate. A white couch. Asterisk. A ficus that actually thrives. Books arranged by subject and then by height and not by heart. The smell of citrus cleaner. Asterisk. I knocked and knocked until the door cracked and he looked at me through a thin slice like a photograph not fully fixed. Asterisk. I pushed in without asking because politeness is a luxury when you love someone who is drowning out loud. Asterisk. And I saw the red silk coiled on his coffee table with the ends trailing like a lizard's tongue. Asterisk. Saw his hands hovering over it as if the cord were singing. And he needed to hold the harmony. Asterisk. I said, too softly. Ren. And he blinked like a waking deer. Asterisk. I took his hands and sat with him on the couch. And we did not talk for an hour. We breathed, we matched, we sipped water because I kept putting the glass back in his hands. Asterisk. Finally he said, it feels like blocking. Like I have been given a simple stage direction, hit your mark, be useful, be quiet. His voice was so ordinary I wanted to break a window to let something loud in. Asterisk. I took the silk and wrapped it in aluminum foil because I did not trust any box in the house to hold it. Asterisk. And I slid the package into my backpack and left with it. His door closed behind me and it sounded like a book shutting around a chapter. We weren't finished with. Asterisk. The theater began to whisper in a way that had nothing to do with vent systems or the old brick settling. Asterisk. When I walked under the catwalk I heard small phrases that didn't align. Higher, tighter, clean, again. Words a crew hears every day, but not like that. Not like prayers that forgot what they were supposed to save. Asterisk. I went to the archives, down in the basement where the air is cool, and the paper smell is one you can chew. Asterisk. Our university has kept programs and notes and photos from productions as far back as the 1930s. Asterisk. I flipped through brittle scrapbooks with gloved hands, black and white faces arranging themselves into colonnades and courtyards and drawing rooms. Asterisk. On a yellowing page from 1952, I found a photo of the grid, the same old wooden rafters then as now, and there, barely visible. Asterisk. A pale strip of color. Tied just where we had found ours, the caption read, "After Mr. Calloway." And then a name and a date with a black line through it, like someone erased a word they knew would call something back. Asterisk. Another box yielded an article clipped from a local paper about a student who fell from the catwalk during a winter rehearsal. Asterisk. No details beyond those antiseptic words. Another program. Carried a dedication to those left aloft. We remember and we bind. And then, like a door opening in my head, the word bind made the red silk feel less like a prop and more like a cord strung between worlds. Asterisk. Not a noose, but a tether. Not an invitation, but a ward. Maybe the silk had been tied there to keep something up, to keep something from coming down. Asterisk. And we had untied it like clever children. We had thrown it into a bin, like a ribbon that had lost its hair. Asterisk. I took my thoughts to Eliza and to Dahlia and to Gabe, because a single belief held alone is just a superstition, but a belief held together can be a plan. Asterisk. We sat in the back row of the black box under the booth window where my notes still clung in. Post-it drifts. Asterisk. The ghost light burned, I said. We took something down that was meant to stay up. Eliza did not argue. She stared at the stage like it owed her an apology. She said, "You want to put it back?" And I nodded and showed them what I had found. The programs with their bent corners. The dedication with the word bind. Asterisk. I unwrapped the red silk from its foil and the smell lifted again. Pomegranate and old perfume and iron. Asterisk. Dahlia reached out with careful hands like a midwife and let the cord lie over her palms. "Silk like this is strong," she murmured, "stronger than it looks. I used it once to rig a shadow puppet when the fishing line. Cut the light wrong, it holds, but it wants a knot that knows what it is." She looked at me. "You tie it, Sloan, not like a rope." like a promise. That night we went in together, Gabe and Ren and Dahlia and Eliza and me. We did not tell the others because fear can skip like a thrown stone and we had too many ripples already. Asterisk. We rolled the ghost light downstage center and plugged it in and the bulb flared and steadied. Asterisk. I carried the coil like an offering and we climbed, knees knocking, hands black with new dust and old. Asterisk. The catwalk boards sighed under us like old men in pews. We reached the rafters, and I could feel the place where the silk had been. Asterisk. Not with my fingers, but the way a tongue finds the place a tooth used to be. A small wrong. A vacancy that hummed. Asterisk. I looped the cord. I did not tie a sailor's knot or a climber's knot. I tied the knot my grandmother taught me when I was 7 and my hair bows kept slipping. Asterisk. A simple, firm bow that can be released with a pull if a child panics. I tied it with the ends kissing and tucked. With the tails like a blessing. Asterisk. I said, because I could not stop myself. After Mr. Calloway, after Mina, after Kazim, and their names knotted the air and held. Asterisk. Dahlia said in a low voice, to those left aloft. And Gabe whispered, bind, like he was finally being given a harmony he knew how to sing. Asterisk. Ren put his hand over mine where it rested on the silk, and the 5 of us breathed together. Asterisk. The house breathed back. The ghost light flickered once and steadied again. The silence that followed was not empty. It was a silence that had somewhere to go. Asterisk. We stayed on stage until the building felt like itself. We told stories about the ridiculous prop cabbage that looked like a rock. Asterisk. About the time the scrim refused to fly, and we all pretended it was a choice. Asterisk. We laughed like people thawing after a long cold. We ate stale donuts from a bakery bag Gabe found in the green room. Asterisk. Sugar dusting our fingers. When we finally left, I wrote a note in my book that said, ghost light stays on, red silk stays tied, and I underlined it 3 times. Asterisk. And I taped a printed sign backstage where the crew drops headsets and wipes their faces after curtain. The sign said simply, house rule, do not remove the red cord, nothing else, because anyone who needed more explanation would not be convinced by footnotes. It did not undo the dead. It did not rewind anything. The emails in our inboxes remained. The grief counselors visited a circle of chairs that smelled like hand sanitizer. Mina's grape container was still in the fridge until I took it home and washed it and cried into my sink. Kazim's pastries did not appear, but the threads stopped, sneaking into our pockets and around our wrists. The whispers in the catwalk thinned from commands to sighs, and then to the normal creaks of wood and house air. Ren slept. Really slept. In a way you can hear in a person's shoulders. Gabe sang again without the choke in the middle, where sadness makes a fist. Eliza walked through the space with her old predatory grace, and clapped once, and the room answered like a flock lifting. We rehearsed slowly. We cried sometimes during warm-ups and called it a vocal exercise. We placed 2 empty chairs downstage left with programs folded on their seats and never spoke about them in rehearsal because some acknowledgments are better done with hands. On opening night, I arrived first. Stage managers always do. The black box felt like a bell before the strike. I went to the center and touched the ghost light's metal post the way you touch a forehead. It was warm. The silk above was a darker vein in the rafters. The knot looked like a signature. I stood on stage and listened to the quiet chatter of the house through the doors before they opened. The smell of powder and hairspray and fresh paint on flats. The rustle of costumes. I could hear the call from somewhere, not my own voice, places please. And I answered with the words that feel like my spine. Thank you, 5. I looked up and thought I saw movement in the grid that was not us. A slow untensing of something strung too tight for too long. Like a breath released. Like a head bowed, I said in my head, I see you. I keep you where you belong. Not below where you can take us, but above where you can watch and be watched. We ran the show clean as a blade. The audience laughed where laughter was allowed. They held very still where stillness belonged. At curtain call we stepped forward with hands linked and bowed, and I saw Eliza glance up once with the corner of her eye, the way a mother checks the stove in a strange kitchen. After the house emptied, we gathered, we hugged, we let our bodies shake. Dahlia brought out a bottle of something bubbly and poured into paper cups. Gabe stood by the ghost light and hummed a hymn his grandmother sings when she braids his little cousin's hair. Ren pressed his palm against the stage floor like he was feeling a pulse. I wrote in my report, Performance 1, Smooth minor stuck latch SL, note to facilities. And then I added an entry that would make no sense to anyone else. Red cord secure. Breath easy. Weeks passed and the show closed and the cord remained. A line of red in a black and brown world. A thin, bright truth. And sometimes after class I would slip into the theater and sit in the last row and watch the ghost light glow on an empty stage. And sometimes I would talk softly because I had learned how to. I would say their names as if polishing stones. And sometimes when the heating kicked on and the ductwork sang its lonely whale song, I would hear something, like a quiet return. Not words, not commands, just a soft threaded sound like silk pulled through fabric. The sound a seam makes when it holds. And I would stand and stretch my back and think of my lists and my keys and the next load in. And I would leave the ghost, light burning like a promise, and I would close the door behind me and the latch would catch with a satisfying click. And the building would settle again, not hungry, not angry. Just a house content with its lights and its cords and its people who have learned how to tie the right knot and how to leave what should be left aloft where it belongs. Watching, silent, bound, at peace. Follow us at House of Horror and leave a comment for more stories like this one.